And next week's edition is at the slightly earlier time, 6:30. On BBC1 in a few minutes, Nanny with Other People's Babies. Here on 2, in the series 100 Great Paintings, the theme of bathing is continued with The Tub by Degas, who found inspiration and beauty in everyday life. Well, tomorrow, Anita Brooker talks about Les Grands Baigneurs by Cézanne. In 10 minutes, in Rugby Special, the quarter-final John Player Cup match between Leicester and Sale. Now on BBC2 at 7:21, the news and sport.
Freed Pakistani prisoners being exchanged for the hijacked airliner hostages are turned away in mid-flight by Libya. The sudden and totally unexpected change of mind by the Libyans, who'd agreed to accept the 54 prisoners freed by Pakistan, has threatened what seemed to be the imminent release of the 100 hostages aboard the hijacked plane. There'd been no hint of any problems ahead when the prisoners left Karachi this morning and had their identities and health checked during a stop at Aleppo in Syria. They were already flying on to Tripoli when the Libyan decision was announced and their plane diverted to Athens in need of fuel.
Pakistan's Minister of Education was sitting in the VIP lounge at Damascus Airport expressing the hope that this long-running saga might be drawing to a close when he was given the news of this latest and totally unexpected snag. It had been expected that within a couple of hours the hostages would be leaving the aircraft and heading for a nearby military hospital for medical checks. But no one had apparently bargained on the unpredictability of the Libyan regime under Colonel Gaddafi. The Pakistanis here and the Syrians who had set up the deal seemed to be taken completely by surprise. Pakistan's ambassador to Damascus, who did the negotiating with the hijackers, said incredulously, "They won't accept the plane." Then he and a host of senior Pakistan officials who had just arrived from Karachi in the expectation of a swift and peaceful end to the incident went into conference to try and find out what was going on. They are still trying to find out.
The 54 prisoners released by Pakistan were put aboard a plane in Karachi. They left, some reluctantly, some defiantly, for Syria on their way, they thought, to Libya. Jim Biddulph watched them go.
It was dawn this morning at Karachi Airport before the plane was given clearance to carry the prisoners out of Pakistan. They'd been brought here from all over the country during the past few days, and the authorities were taking no chance of trouble. But despite the precautions taken on the tarmac, there was trouble later on inside the plane when security forces had to put down a scuffle. Some of the prisoners are known to have been unwilling to leave their own country, which may have been the reason for the disturbance. Pakistan is deeply unhappy at being forced to let these 54 prisoners go. The government swore it would never free anyone accused of major crimes, but charges against some of these prisoners include murder and treason. Understandably, not everyone was reluctant to leave. Jim Biddulph, BBC, Pakistan.
For the other prisoners, the hostages aboard the hijacked Pakistani plane at Damascus, the ordeal goes on. They've now spent 13 days in the airliner which they boarded for a 3-hour flight. For them, freedom, which had seemed just hours away, is once again uncertain. And the latest report from Athens says the captain of the Syrian plane with the released Pakistani prisoners on board has now filed a flight plan for Damascus. The constituency party of Mr. Christopher Brocklebank Fowler, the Conservative MP who said he won't be standing again for the party, have sent Mrs. Thatcher a telegram of support. They said they felt Mr. Brocklebank Fowler, who represents North West Norfolk, had let them down. At an emergency meeting, the officers decided to wait until after he speaks in the budget debate in the Commons on Monday before deciding what action to take. The President was asked if he had given a full explanation for his decision.
Well, he did, and this was, he said, was an accumulation of things which he had disagreed with policies, coming to the budget, which he felt was not a good budget, and, as he said, the last straw.
There had been a growing rift developing between him and party officials, hadn't there?
I think a growing rift is a little strong. What had happened over the past months, he had made certain speeches which appeared to be criticising Margaret Thatcher's policies, and many of us disagreed with his views on that, and as a result we had several meetings with him.
Later, Mr. Brocklebank Fowler was asked if he had anything further to say.
No, not at all, because my next step, having taken the decision I have, is to speak in the House of Commons in the debate on Monday, and I'm not prepared to say anything that I've not said already until I've spoken to the House.
The Liberal leader, Mr. David Steele, has said any Liberal and Social Democratic alliance must be in a position to recruit people such as Mr. Brocklebank Fowler, who shared their view that electoral reform and fundamental economic and social change were needed. Mr. Steele said if the alliance was going to succeed, it would have to attract those who were despairing at the present direction of the Tory party. The opposition leader, Mr. Michael Foot, has also attacked the budget, saying Mrs. Thatcher should call an election to let people judge her record. But Mr. Foot said it would be unfair for her to sack the Chancellor. Many Tory MPs and perhaps some cabinet ministers were saying it would be like the organ grinder strangling the monkey because no one liked the tune. Later, in Scotland, Mr. Tony Benn said the establishment is preparing a campaign to replace Mrs. Thatcher, but to prevent another Labour government. He told Labour Party delegates in Perth that the policies reached at party conferences were the only ones which could save Britain.
Because I believe the establishment in Britain is now beginning to prepare a campaign for a national government. That is the only way to understand what is really happening. Their objective would be to replace Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister and also to prevent a Labour government from being elected to power. The budget has thoroughly frightened industrialists who support the Tories and who think a coalition government built around the Tory wets, the Liberals and the Gang of Four, who are playing the role of Ramsay MacDonald, offer the best hope for saving the Conservative policies in which they believe.
Passengers at Heathrow Airport in London had to contend with long queues as customs and immigration officials intensified their industrial action. They're working to rule as part of the civil servants' dispute over a pay claim, and this morning most of them stopped work.
It was a token strike lasting only an hour, but coming in Heathrow's Saturday morning peak, it produced something like the disruption that civil service unions had been forecasting. The growing queues of passengers, mostly bound for North America, were taken completely by surprise, and few realised what was going on. Simply by closing 6 passport desks, leaving only 1 officer on duty, the immigration staff brought the departure process to a standstill and caused some flight delays. It was, said one union official, the first in what could be a series of lightning stoppages. Meanwhile, the work to rule by customs and immigration staff continues, with union officials claiming heavy delays for passengers coming through the Red Channel with goods to declare.
With the United States now playing down its concern over the civil war in El Salvador, the country's president, José Napoleón Duarte, has declared his readiness to start talks with left-wing forces. At the same time, he's rejected outside offers to mediate in the conflict, and as Martin Bell reports from El Salvador, he's in a strong position to negotiate with the guerrillas.
The Salvadoran army is not going to collapse as Nicaragua's did 2 years ago. It's better trained and, even with only limited American aid, better equipped. It is also increasing its strength. Here at a garrison near San Salvador, some 200 newly trained artillerymen were marking their readiness for combat with the ceremony of saluting the national flag. Also held back for the occasion were a couple of the 105mm field guns badly needed up country in the war against the guerrillas. It is in fact a civil war, though the troops' commander tells them it's being fought on the other side by mercenaries and traitors seeking to subvert the democratic process. Also on hand are Colonel Guterres, a member of the ruling junta, and the Defense Minister, Colonel Garcia. They and their government are playing down the National Guard's dependence on American military support. This is a Salvadoran war to be fought by Salvadorans against outside intervention. The appeal is to patriotism, and the ceremony ends with the singing of the national anthem. Of course, there will be no military solution in El Salvador, but there'll be no political solution either satisfactory to the Salvadoran government unless the military can hold the line, and that the military are mobilizing to do. Martin Bell, BBC, El Salvador.
In Chicago, 19 people have died in a fire at an hotel. Fire officials say they suspect arson because of the way the blaze spread quickly through the 70-room building, which housed mainly poor people. And in France, a spectacular fire has destroyed huge fuel storage tanks at an oil depot south of Paris. Reports say 2 explosions preceded the fire, and more than 100 firemen were powerless to do anything but contain it. All buildings in the area were evacuated, and it's expected the fire will burn itself out in a day or 2. In West Berlin, the old Reichstag Parliament building was attacked by arsonists. 38 other buildings in the sector were also vandalized in a wave of damage which followed street violence between police and squatters. Youths broke into the Reichstag building, poured petrol over the floor and set fire to it. Firemen quickly put out the blaze. In 1933, the building was gutted by a fire which Hitler used as a pretext to suppress the Communist Party and imprison its members. It's now a conference centre and museum. In Northern Ireland, 5 men were arrested and a number of guns seized when soldiers raided a cottage near Rosslea in County Fermanagh, about 2 miles from the border. The police say the 5, 2 of whom have addresses in the Republic, are all being questioned about terrorist offences. Now with news of today's sport, beginning with soccer and the League Cup, here's Bill Hamilton.
Well, the League Cup final has seen many changes. When it began 21 years ago, most First Division clubs didn't bother to take part. That first final, played over 2 legs between Rotherham and Aston Villa, was worth just £7,000 at the turnstiles. Today at Wembley, 100,000 fans paid over £600,000 to see Liverpool play West Ham. It was a hard-fought but often scrappy match, the most exciting moments coming in extra time. Liverpool in the dark strip, the commentator Barry Davis.
Right for the cross by Alan Kennedy, and well taken by Case. McDermott's gone up ahead, and Case again, and off the crossbar. Ray Stewart poised. Oh, magnificent save by Ray Clements.
A magnificent save, but with just 3 minutes to go, Kennedy scored for Liverpool, and with seconds left, Ray Stewart hit a penalty for West Ham. So, a 1-1 draw. The replay will be at Villa Park on April the 1st. One sad event was the booking of West Ham's manager John Lyall for calling the referee Clive Thomas a cheat. Well, you can see the exclusive coverage of the final on Match of the Day tomorrow afternoon on BBC1. In the league, Ipswich again turned on the style to beat Spurs 3-0 at Portman Road. Eric Gates got the first goal, the 100th for Ipswich this season. Aston Villa too seemed set for victory when Peter Wyth scored twice before half-time. But Joe Jordan also got 2 for Manchester United in the second half, and the game ended in a 3-3 draw. So Ipswich are now a point ahead at the top with a game in hand. Nottingham Forest beat Brighton, but West Brom lost to Manchester City. Our cameras were at Molineux for the relegation battle between Wolves and Norwich. Wolves, playing from right to left, won through to the semi-finals of the FA Cup in midweek. Today they were in complete control of the first half and should have established an early lead. Andy Gray, chasing a through ball, was brought down by Downs. A clear penalty, but to the relief of Norwich's new keeper Chris Woods, Clark's spot kick cannoned back into play off the post. Norwich, though, was soon in trouble again. Richards set up the attack, and when the ball was floated into the box, it fell to Palmer. This time there was no mistake. 4 minutes into the second half and Wolves struck again. Richards flicked the ball on to Eaves, and as the winger's shot sped for goal, Richards himself got the vital touch. Norwich had just one chance to get back into the game, but Fashionu's fine effort from Maguire's free kick was brilliantly palmed away by Bradshaw. Minutes later and the game was as good as over. Hibbert's throw was headed on by Richards, and McDowell, facing his own goal, completed Norwich's day of misery. They're going to have a tough fight now, avoiding relegation. Well, that win has certainly eased Wolves' problems, but Norwich stays second from the foot. Palace, Leicester and Brighton all lost. West Ham, despite their Wembley appearance, still lead the second division by 10 points. Their nearest rivals, Notts County, were beaten at Grimsby, who've moved into third position. Blackburn, too, are handily placed. In Scotland, Celtic crushed St Mirren 7-0, with Frank McGarvey scoring a hat-trick against his former club. With Aberdeen going down to the bottom club Kilmarnock and Rangers losing to Hearts, Celtic are now odds-on favourites to win the title. On the second day of the test in Barbados, England's batsmen have collapsed against the pace of the West Indies fast bowlers. The onslaught was led by Michael Holding, who has taken 3 wickets for 16 runs. Those wickets include the vital ones of Boycott, out for naught, and Botham for 26. Before lunch, England had dismissed the West Indies for 265. Captain Ian Botham took the last 3 wickets of Roberts, Holding and Garner to take his figures to 4 for 77. And the latest score we have from Bridgetown is England 99 for 8 at tea, with Willie on 5 and Jackman on naught. Rugby Union and the weather hit one of the matches in the quarter-finals of the John Player Cup today. The game between Nottingham and Gosforth was postponed. In the matches played, the holders Leicester beat Sale 21-7. The match between London Scottish and Gloucester was drawn, but London Scottish go through on the tries rule. Moseley defeated the Metropolitan Police 22 points to 6. In the semi-final of the Schweppes Welsh Cup, Llanelli went down to Bridgend 15 points to 22. The match between Cardiff and Swansea was postponed. Warrington's unchallenged run as Rugby League's top team came under heavy pressure this afternoon when they met second-placed Wakefield Trinity in the 3-5s Challenge Cup third round. It was thanks to 3 early tries that Warrington and the White Strip kept their lead and a place in the semi-finals. Eddie Waring's the commentator.
And a good break by Cully. He's got past 2 players, he's still parading, and he's got 2 supporters on him on the left-hand side, and a chance for a try in the corner, and indeed it is the first try to John Bevan. Warrington putting on quite a bit of pressure now, leading 5 points to 2. 6 tackle coming up, a little short kick. If the ball bounces right, it could have been troublesome. It's still troublesome, and it's a try. Wakefield now producing some of their best football. They're standing very deep. The pass is in, nice little short one. Can he go in the corner? It must be a try. Be a gemmer kick if it to get it. And it's not a bad, and in fact it's a good one. It's a good one, 13 points to 9.
And that's the way it stayed. Warrington 13 points, Wakefield Trinity 9. The other third-round games are being played tomorrow.
Finally, Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park was the meeting place for a demonstration today against the ban on marches in London this month under the Public Order Act. As usual, the police turned up in vans and cars, the media were there too, but as John Kiddie reports, the event wasn't quite what they'd expected.
I was there, police vans were there, but apart from us, the crowd was rather small. A lone anarchist with homemade placard and milk crates surrounded largely by pressmen. Under the watchful eyes of the law, he apologised for the poor turnout, saying everything was organised at the last minute. However, another speaker, expounding on the meaning of life, managed rather better, drawing a respectable-sized crowd. Our demonstrator made the best of things, handing out his leaflets. But any hopes of threatening law and order began to fade. Finally, he admitted defeat and gave up, leaving his placard behind to carry on the fight.
That's the news and sport on 2. Our late news is at 10:20.
And now look at the weather. Tomorrow, East Anglia and South East England will be rather cloudy with some showers. Elsewhere, there'll be sunny intervals, but some showers too, and these may be heavy in places, and over Scotland they'll become wintry during the day. It will be a little colder tomorrow, with temperatures between 5 and 8 centigrade, that's 41 to 46 Fahrenheit. Programmes for this Saturday evening here on BBC2. In a moment, Rugby Special features the John Player Cup, highlights of the quarter-final between cup holders Leicester and Sale. At 8:40, The Reef, an exploration of the astonishing beauty and variety in Australia's Great Barrier Reef, one of the natural wonders of the world. At 9:40, Arena presents Huston's Hobby. To mark the publication of film director John Huston's autobiography, Gavin Miller visits him at his remote home in Mexico to discuss his film and his new book.
My life is composed of random, tangential, disparate episodes.
At 10:25, Film International features Messidor, the story of 2 Swiss girls whose light-hearted attempt to live by their wits alone becomes soured when they turn to violence.
Wow! Super! Mais t'es folle pour ça!
And at 10:25, the Old Grey Whistle Test, rounding off tonight's programmes here on BBC2, which continue now with that Rugby Special.